own story. Um, of an example to give you a true kind of visual of the difference between implicit and explicit bias. I was on my way to a training and I had broke a nail. And so I wanted to make sure I was able to get my nail fixed before I stood up before hundreds of people and do a training. And so, of course, I talked to my dear friend Siri and I did a search for a nail salon in the area. And Siri, based on ratings and the distance, I found this nail salon and they took walk-ins. You did not have to have an appointment. I was not in my typical neighborhood. I was traveling to a training. And so I drove to this particular location that was a nail salon that could take walk-ins. Before I got out the car, before I opened the door to the nail salon, just think for a moment. What demographic of individuals do you think that I perceived would be in the nail salon, working in this nail salon, actual nail techs? And I'm sure you guessed Asian or Vietnamese. And if you said Vietnamese, you're correct. I've had my nails done many times and I always ask, and because of my experience, because of my exposure, I perceived that it would be Vietnamese individuals in the nail salon when I went in. So I opened the door, went to the front desk, and the receptionist was there. And true enough, it was a Vietnamese male. And I said to him, "I'm so sorry, I don't have a nail appointment, but I broke a nail. May I see one of your nail techs?" He said, "Sure, go to table number 3. I approached table number 3, took a seat and handed her my hand. And I looked up and noticed that the nail tech was a white, blonde female. And to my surprise, she was not Vietnamese. I remember in that moment looking around the nail salon and saying, wow, this is a very diverse nail salon. Gave her my hand and I proceeded to allow her to repair my nail. Now, that is scenario number 1. That is truly how it happened. If I change the outcome of that scenario, it would give you a difference of implicit bias versus explicit bias. So let's start with the same story again. I broke a nail, talked to Siri. She directed me to the nearest nail salon that could take walk-ins. I drove up. I perceived implicit bias, ding, 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 that it would be Vietnamese individuals working in the nail salon. I proceed. The receptionist tells me to go to table number 3. We're changing the outcome. I sit down and notice that my nail tech is not Vietnamese, but she's a white female. So here's the difference in the outcome. If I were to say to her, thank you so much for taking me at such short notice, but I prefer to wait for another nail tech who's Vietnamese to repair my nail. That would then be me acting out on those biases, making a conscious decision to not allow someone to do my nail based on her ethnicity. Now, we all know that your ethnicity does not qualify you for a skill set. Your race does not qualify you for a specific industry. It is truly your education and your experience, because you can be white, you can be black, you can be Asian, you could be of a different demographic and still do a great job at your industry. And so your race, your demographic has nothing to do with that skill set and what you're doing. However, if someone has a preconceived idea of the type of people, the type of gender, the type of race that should be in this industry and should be in this role, and you consciously act out and you resist or you refuse to have someone do their job simply based on their race, that is true definition of explicit bias that has been used to show discriminatory prejudice behavior. Now, I use the nail salon story because it's palatable. It's easy to digest to say, oh, she chose a different nail tech. But if we were to change the industry, and let's say I was showing up for the first day of work in corporate America in downtown metropolitan city, and I find out when I arrive that my CEO is a female. And I decide that I do not want to work for this company because I don't trust the leadership that this company will be successful because it's a woman versus a male. If I move the industry to a medical industry and you're someone that shows up for a doctor's appointment with this doctor for the first time, and the doctor comes out and they're African American and they're not white, and you think to yourself, they may not be qualified. These are those little biases that, when acted out upon, it shows our lack of knowledge. It shows that we are conscious in our effort to be prejudiced toward one group versus the other. And that's what we want to touch on today. Identify that you have implicit bias. Identify that it is something that we all have. But it is also our responsibility to check those biases. It is our responsibility to debunk the idea that certain groups can only do certain things. It is our responsibility, if we're working with people or representing people, that we see them as individuals and not the demographic that they represent. So let's talk a little bit further about those attitudes. Explicit attitude is conscious.